Start seeing if you can notice in the room who's an influencer, who's a person that influences other people's decisions, other people's attitudes, other people's behavior. Because there's always another person that's not a leader that influences other people's behavior.
Have you ever walked into a meeting and instantly felt the tension? Before anyone even said a word, you could cut the atmosphere with a knife. Or maybe you've been in a leadership moment where you thought you understood the room, only to realize later you completely misread it. In today's episode, we're diving into a leadership skill that often goes unnoticed but makes all the difference: situational awareness. Or simply put, learning how to read the room so you can lead with clarity and confidence. Let's jump in.
Do you wish that you could lead your team in a way that honors and glorifies God? Are you struggling to overcome self-doubt as a leader and have a desire to be more confident in your role? Welcome to the Woman of Faith in Leadership podcast. I'm Rika, and for the last decade, I've experienced my fair share of managing challenging employees and teams in middle management leadership roles. I committed my leadership journey to God, and it changed everything. And I'm ready to share everything I've learned with you. Now, if you're ready to lead your team in a way that honors God, grab that notebook and pen, and don't forget your chai latte, and let's dive in. Now, before we jump in, I'd like to invite you to the free leadership quiz that I've created with literally you as the listener in mind. I've spoken to many listeners who really struggle with confidence in their leadership roles. So, using my own experiences, I identified 6 things that could possibly be holding you back from leading with confidence. So if you take my 2.5 to 3 minute quiz, you'll discover your biggest confidence blocker, and you're going to get a biblical next step to grow as a leader. So you can go to womanoffaithinleadership.com/quiz, and you can take the quiz right there. You'll receive the results immediately in your email, and I'm also going to send you some biblical encouragement after that. So that's awesome. Now, in leadership, what you say matters, but so does what you notice. Situational awareness is about understanding what's happening in the room, or i.e. the environment, how people are responding not only to you but to other people, so therefore the dynamics, and how you're showing up as a leader, meaning your presence. When you get this right, we can lead more effectively, build trust, and make better decisions, which is ultimately what we want, right? And as Christian leaders, situational awareness always helps us lead with compassion because we pause to see people the way God sees them. So in a worldly sense, situational awareness would be, or reading the room, would be so that you can control the room. You can see people's weaknesses, you can see, where you can, how people are feeling or what, nonverbal cues they're doing, so that you can control that. But as a Christian leader, I want to really state this, that the reason why we want situational awareness is not for the world's reasons. It is really so that we can see people the way God sees them. And I have said this before on the podcast, but if you can see the people at your work the way God sees them, your employees, be a bit more understanding for some of their personal circumstances or things that they're going through, it will help you understand. Look, it does not excuse the behavior. I want to make that quite clear. It does not excuse any behavior from their part to be disrespectful, to be rude, to go behind your back, to gossip or anything like that. However, what it does do is it gives us a bit of an insight to that person's background and where they're coming from. In some of the episodes that I've did where I talked about gossip specifically, I mentioned that, some people gossip naturally because in their homes, gossip came naturally. Their parents would come home and gossip about colleagues. Then the children would come home and gossip or whinge about children at school, about their peers, and then they literally take that skill into the workplace, not really knowing or understanding that it's an incorrect behavior that's unprofessional and just hurts other people's feelings, right? So it's not to say that we excuse the behavior, it's more to say that we understand where they're coming from. Some people just gossip because they're mean. There's no good reason or no good excuse there. So let's talk about why situational awareness matters. Situational awareness isn't just a leadership nice to have, if I can put that in quotation marks. It's actually a really essential skill that goes missed or even unnoticed, or some people aren't even aware of that. In Proverbs 18 verse 13, it says, "To answer before listening, that is folly and shame." Folly means foolishness. So if you answer before listening, or before really looking at the person's nonverbal cues, the way they're acting, the way that they're moving their eyes. I mean, I'm not saying that you have to become a body language expert. I'm just saying that sometimes if you listen or if you look, the way you react might be different from when you're just trying to respond for the sake of responding, okay? Leadership without awareness can lead to unnecessary conflict, cause you to miss hidden opportunities, and to leave your team feeling unseen or misunderstood. Being able to read the room always allows you to respond rather than to react. And that's the difference between managing chaos and leading confidently, which I know is something that you are looking for. So let's talk about the 3 dimensions of situational awareness. I kind of mentioned it already in the beginning. I talked about environmental, social, and then self-awareness. So let's talk about environmental awarenesses. So what's happening around you? So when you are thinking about environmental awareness, and what I would like you to do is I'd like to invite you to start thinking about these 3 dimensions one at a time. You can't walk into a room and then all of a sudden you're going to be aware of all these 3 things. It's just absolutely impossible. That's not going to happen. If you do that, amazing, but I don't think it's really realistic. So in terms of environmental awareness, you can start. This is a simple practice. Start noticing people's body language. Start noticing the tone of voice that people use or the tone of the conversation. Start noticing the energy in meetings. For example, when people come in with a negative mindset, the whole meeting goes negative, right? Whereas if people come in with a positive mindset, the whole meeting is positive. And then a second thing that you can start noticing is, are people leaning in or are they disengaging in the conversation? So it doesn't have to be in a conversation with you. It can be conversation with other people. So let's say, for example, you go to a staff morning tea or you go to a staff meeting where people are, where there are more than, a couple of people. Start noticing things like body language, tone, and then the energy in the room, but then also start noticing whether people are leaning into the conversation or they're completely disengaging from the conversation, and what are their body language cues when they're disengaging. How can you tell? Okay. Then start noticing, this is the final thing in environmental awareness that you can start looking out for is, are their voices calm? Or can you sense in their tone of voice or in their voices, in the loudness of their voice, that tension's brewing? So this is something that's a little bit more obvious. We can tell from people's tone of voice or from the way that they speak or the loudness or the softness of their voice whether tension's brewing or not. But again, let's say, for example, you get really good at noticing in terms of voices, voice loudness or, tone of voice or things like that when people speak to you. Let's say, for example, you can pick up the cue that somebody's busy getting upset. Then you can actually diffuse that situation because you are situationally aware. Instead of it going into an argument, you can actually diffuse the situation, sit the person down and say something like, I can see that you're really getting upset. I'm just really trying to understand what about the situation is making you so upset. This is something that we do need to talk about. And then, at least that person feels heard and seen because you have identified what they are feeling. And so the second dimension is social awareness. So who's in the room and what matters to them. So some things that you can start noticing and working on is understanding group dynamics, for example, relationships between people, and certain unspoken rules. So this is really an episode where you should be making lots of notes. If you haven't kind of figured that out, definitely go and make some notes on this, because there's lots of homework in this episode. But the point is not for it to be homework. The point is for you to be more situationally aware, so that you can see people the way God sees them, but also so that you can be a better and confident leader, right? So start noticing if there are any unspoken rules between people, meaning that if one person does one thing, another person reciprocates with another action. That wouldn't necessarily be an obvious action, but like a nodding of the head, or a flick of the finger, or a movement of the body, and then another person would react saying, okay, yeah, let's do that, without, that was just a body language cue, for example. And then ask yourself, who's influencing decisions around here? And so number one, start seeing if you can notice in the room who's an influencer, who's a person that influences other people's decisions, other people's attitudes, other people's behavior. Because there's always another person that's not a leader that influences other people's behavior. Like when I was working at a school, the 2 years before I came over to Australia, actually in 2012, I was working at a school where there was a lot of female teachers, and they clearly had a leader of the pack. Like they always, the five of them were always together. There was always this person, if she said go or jump, they would say how high, basically. And it was school, like these are all adults. It sounds to me like high school, But she was an influencer. She did not have any leadership positions, but thinking back to it now, the deputy principal or the principal really should have brought that person of influence under their wing to influence that group of female teachers for the better versus for the worse. So definitely see who's influencing decisions around here. And then who feels unheard? Is there anybody who feels and looks kind of frustrated with the situation, or that they've made some suggestions and their suggestions have not been taken on board? So anything like that. And then just remember what James 1 verse 19 says. Everybody should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. And so on that note, let's go to the third dimension, which is self-awareness, how you show up as a leader. So start noticing your tone of voice, your expressions, and the presence shaped how your presence shapes the atmosphere. That's what I'm trying to say. If you walk into a room, do things go stiff? Do things go, naturally into a direction of, okay, the boss is here, now we can't talk about this topic anymore? Or is it more laid back? Or do people get stressed? Or whatever that might be. So start definitely, because there's not like necessarily a right or a wrong here. The exercise is to start becoming situationally aware, so that then in the future you can do something about that. So pause and pray before stepping into high pressure moments. So this is definitely something that it's not only about self-awareness, but it's about godly awareness. Becoming aware of the Holy Spirit's presence and of God's presence within your life. And then you pray that He will be with you, and that He will give you wisdom, knowledge, and insight, especially in a high pressure moment, so that you won't stumble over your words. When I came over to Australia, because English is my second language, one thing that I prayed for a lot was not to stumble over my words, or to even say the wrong thing, or that people would misunderstand me, for example. So, but I was becoming very aware of that, but to a detrimental point. So at some point I just had to let it go. Like, I cannot control, and it's okay. I had to realize that it's actually okay to make mistakes. It's actually okay to have a South African accent. It's actually okay to fumble over my words. People are not judging me for that. But it was something that I became aware of. So, and then the last thing that you can ask yourself when it comes to self-awareness is, how might others be experiencing me right now? So that's a very good question to ask. If you're in anger mode and you are shouting and screaming at your team, if you were situationally aware, you'd be thinking to yourself, how are people perceiving me right now, yelling and screaming at them? Well, they might not respect me very much. They might not trust me as a leader, and they might want to leave to go to a different workplace where they're actually treated with respect. So that's the negative of that. But if you are in a very supportive role, you are a servant leader who really supports your team, well, again, how are people experiencing you right now? They're experiencing you as supportive, as encouraging, as a good leader. I mean, you can think whatever you want in there. Obviously, if you speak to people and then find out, that's even better. And then let's not forget the most important one, the fourth dimension, which is one that I'll just add as a bonus here, because it actually really forms the foundation of anything and everything we've already spoken about, and that is godly awareness. So as female Christian leaders, we really need to be situationally aware of God's presence and about his handiwork in situations and in our lives as well. So that pausing and praying and asking the Lord for wisdom, insight, and knowledge, that's only the beginning. You can also practice the spirit of discernment. So if you don't feel like you have the spirit of discernment, then it's something that you can 100% pray for. You can pray for the gifts, those gifts of the Spirit. And it's something that I felt I had for a very long time. And then I felt kind of like, oh, wow, I made a really bad decision. So my spirit of discernment is completely tuned out. And I had to start practicing that again. So definitely being God aware will build your confidence or your Godfidence. So I want to end this episode by giving you five practical tools to read the room. Okay, and some of this I've already spoken about, but if you've not made any notes, then this is definitely the part where you want to start making notes. So the first one is pause before you speak. Give yourself 15 to 30 seconds to observe first. Now, this is obviously not if somebody has already asked you a question and then you go silent for 15 to 30 minutes. But what I do mean is that if you come into a room before starting to speak to anybody, take 15 to 30 seconds to observe first some of the things we already discussed above with the 4 dimensions or 3 dimensions plus the God awareness one. And then jump into conversations. 2, listen beyond words. Notice emotional cues, not just verbal responses, but also people's emotions on their faces, people's nonverbal cues, and that atmosphere, which you can cut with a knife. Ask open-ended questions. So when you are then starting those conversations with people, invite dialogue instead of dominating conversations. So pretty sure you don't do this already, but asking open-ended questions is a really good way to get people talking, especially if they've not been talking at all or if they've been feeling excluded. And it's also a really good conversation starter. And then number 4, match your message to your presence, okay? So make sure that your tone of voice and your body language matches with the intent of whatever you're trying to say. So just last week, I was saying something to somebody and I realized it actually came across, I don't know if rude's the right word, but I actually meant it in a joking manner because South Africans can be very sarcastic. But this person really did not catch my sarcasm. And I realized afterwards that, I don't think my tone of voice actually matched what I was trying to say. And afterwards I had to apologize because the person took it in the wrong way. So make sure that what you're trying to say, and look, it comes with practice. And look, here I am. I'm the one doing the show, giving you advice, but I'm still doing it incorrect. So it takes practice, but by no means are you going to ever be 100% perfect at that. But just, again, being aware of that for yourself is a really good starting point. And then the last one, which I mentioned already, is praying for discernment, asking the Holy Spirit for wisdom in all leadership decisions, not just some, or not just the most important, or not just those ones that actually cause you stress. Even the ones that you're already confident in, ask the Holy Spirit for wisdom. And so, as a final thing that I want to give you is Isaiah 30 verse 21 that says, whether you turn to the right or to the left, your ears will hear a voice behind you saying, this is the way, walk in it. Leadership moments will test you. But when you pause, notice, and invite God into that moment, you'll lead from a place of peace and strength. So as additional, I will leave some reflection prompts to you in the show notes. I won't read them out here on the show, but there are some additional ones. And I'll make sure that I actually pop the notes of today's show a little bit more extensively into the show notes so that if you wanted to copy and paste them into a notebook or into your OneNote or whatever you want to, that's good. Go save them because there's a lot of things that you can start doing, lots of tips that I've given you that you can start being situationally aware. And then finally, just a final reminder to go and do the quiz at womenoffaithinleadership.com/quiz. And you'll learn in just 2 to 3 minutes what's that one thing holding you back from leading with confidence. I look forward to chatting with you all again next week, and I hope you have a very blessed week. God bless you. See you next week. Hey, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If so, would you take 30 seconds and leave me a 5-star written review on Apple Podcasts? It would mean so much to me to read your feedback. Also, it would really bless me big if you shared this episode with a fellow leader who might benefit from hearing today's message. And remember, put on the armor of God daily and walk by faith and not by sight. I'll meet you back on Monday for another episode.